Hi, this is the Playtyper Guy podcast. I'm Stephen Robinson, and joining me today is clinical psychologist Julie Hotard. How are you, Julie?
Good.
I've kind of referred to you as sort of a disinformation expert. I've been very excited to chat with you because for a while I've been reading your work online and on social media. And I feel like you have sort of correctly identified some of the issues we're sort of facing. I know others have talked about disinformation as a major problem online and how that's influenced the electorate. But you have, I think, kind of really hammered home how this is sort of often a self perpetuating, consultant driven issue that has impacted the Democratic Party from within. Could you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, the Democratic Party is composed of people that seem at least as naive as ordinary people about propaganda. They don't seem to know what they're dealing with here. Uh, Biden had a disinformation governance board, and for just I think it was just a few months, maybe in 2022, and ended up disbanding it. Didn't respond to right-wing attacks of the person that he placed at the head of the board, Nina Jankowicz. Um, it, Democrats just don't seem to get it, that we're dealing with a very powerful force, and that it's why Trump got elected twice, why the Republican Party now controls all three branches of government, because the people believe these lies. And so you have to fight these lies and not back down the way Biden did, for example, with the Disinformation Governance Board.
And speaking to that, I recall um, kind of, and it's gobsmacking to think about it, but Biden sort of dismissed the idea of Elon Musk buying Twitter, which is sort of major online town hall. It like he saw this as just, oh, it's just very online people who are on social media, which obviously isn't true. I don't know who was informing him. Like from the most recent election, um, almost predominantly Latinos in particular got their news from social media, young people, a lot of like key Democratic demographics were getting their information from social media, and to sort of ignore the impact that would have is astonishing. But it speaks to what you were saying, like the people in the room who would not sort of raise the alarm bells of what it would mean for this online town hall, as it were, to be controlled by someone like Musk.
Biden just didn't realize it. The Democratic Party has a number of issues, and of course, they're up against something terrible, fascism coming into our government. And it's hard to do. And one of their problems is a geriatric problem, that they have so many leaders in the Democratic Party who are old and of a certain generation that was very naive about social media and still is, because it wasn't what happened in their growing up years. But now you've got all these voters who are much younger than they are, and they're all on social media. And the Democratic leadership needs to recognize this and to deal with it. Democratic consultants are a huge problem, because even the younger ones seem to take on the same beliefs as the older consultants did generations ago, who didn't know anything about social media or social media propaganda. So you've got really this big problem of being very naive on the part of Democratic leaders about social media and about propaganda in general. And then their trusted consultants who they believe in so much, reinforcing that constantly. So it seems like all their advisors are reinforcing the naivete, reinforcing their lack of understanding of social media, rather than saying, hey, look, let's open up to what's happening in the modern world.
Something you've touched on a lot, Julie, that I've read, that always stands out to me, regarding the criticizing consultants, because sometimes I've seen people online just sort of attack them as the man or consultant, just sort of put it out there without supporting the issues. And you sort of kind of bring, to use a younger term, the receipts here of how the consultant class really has this idea of what the electorate is that is fundamentally flawed, or what they're interested in. And if I understand correctly, is that they prioritize bipartisanship, which isn't fundamentally untrue, but yet, with the Biden administration, it was sort of this idea that passing a bipartisan bill on its own would just sort of be showing that government works, and that people could work across the aisle and shake hands, like as friends across the aisle, really matter to voters. And that's not really true, especially if it's not delivering. They would much rather have, good policy, regardless of whether it's on a party line basis or not. But where do they get this idea that bipartisanship is what people really want to see?
Because I think, general sense, maybe they did, maybe they still do. Do you want people to cooperate in government and stop the squabbling, is one way people put it, and get together and do things for the American people? Well, yes, I do. Well, what if that results in a compromise that screws over your, people of your racial or ethnic or sexual orientation group? Or what if that results in, well, no, I don't want it then. So a lot of times the devil and the angel are in the details here. What do people really want? And I think people are, a lot of voters and non-voters are really ignorant of government, and they don't really know how it works. And a lot of people, thanks to even the mainstream media, news media, have not really realized the extent to which fascism is already here, and we need to beat it back rather than just stop it from coming, because it's already here with all of these concentration camps.
We were talking about propaganda, right? And my background maybe is different because I studied politics, but I'm also obviously in the arts and studied media, and I felt acutely aware of the impact of propaganda in Nazi Germany. Like, that it mattered, like Hitler being an amazing orator and communicator. I mean, I'm not trying to compliment Hitler, obviously, and Goebbels and all this stuff mattered. And it just seems as if sometimes I don't get that Democrats fully understand the impact of propaganda, and that they're dealing with people who are not good faith communicators, or that they are shy about, they feel like being measured is more important when up against, someone saying, this is the party that wants to take your children and, turn them into a different sex, and you are somehow going to win that debate with a better measured well, I know you probably have concerns about your child, being castrated, but I'm not going to do that, and whatever, as opposed to being like, you're just trying to like horribly harass other people. I don't know. So what are your thoughts as to why there's this sort of issue with like confronting propaganda on its own terms?
I think it's because a lot of partly the geriatric problem, partly because a lot of Democratic leaders are still acting the way they did in Eisenhower's day. Now, Eisenhower was a Republican who spoke in good faith. He had concerns about the military-industrial complex, I believe. He and a lot of people of his time spoke a lot in good faith. They could be compromised with, they could be spoken to as if they were being honest. And so that's the generation they're in. That's the point of view they have. But when you're here with fascists, when you're here with people that blatantly lie constantly, and all their power, the fact that they control the three branches of government, it all comes from the lies that they tell and that right-wing media repeat, and right-wing social media repeat. When you're dealing with these people, you have to change your habits, but they just haven't. Habits are hard for people to change. Sometimes you just have to get in a new generation in politics that has different habits, because people have had these habits for decades. They really are ingrained habits. They're very set in their ways.
Not to go too much into your background, as a psychologist, but I don't know if you could speak or what your theories are. Maybe it's, it's not something to diagnose, but definitely within the party, the Democratic Party, if you have, Nancy Pelosi born in 1940, Joe Biden born in 1942, being formative years being during Eisenhower's administration, right? Like that's a Republican when you are 12 to like 18 or something, which is like
Mhm.
me remembering Reagan or the first Bush, um, compared to sort of the younger generation. And they've compared this to say like AOC, right? Who like, I don't remember any quote unquote good Republic. What are you talking about? Like that's the problem within the party in certain ways. It's just this idea of like, what are you talking about? Why do I need a strong Republican Party? And Pelosi and Biden had said this, like, we need a good, like, what are you talking about? They're all terrible. But I don't see the kind of opposite occurring within the Republican Party. And and I don't know if that's a sort of its own internal propaganda, because if you're a 90-year-old Republican, you don't necessarily speak wistfully of a Democratic Party of LBJ, or anything like that. You are just sort of, they're all commies.
Mhm.
And it seems like there's that sort of consistent through line beyond generations of of Republicans that just isn't there with Democrats. So do you have any thoughts on that as to why that might be the case?
Oh, well, I think most people are basically followers, not leaders, and even our leaders follow sometimes and follow other leaders or their tribe, uh, and people keep the same habits. And so I think Republicans control their own party with an iron fist. And their leaders say Democrats are all communists and they're all evil and, the Satanist or whatever. And the leaders of the Democratic Party and their consultants, trusted consultants, have said for generations, oh, the Republicans are just other people. They have their own point of view, but they're good people, and we should reach across the. So it's partly being followers rather than leaders. A lot of the Democratic so-called leaders are following consultants that are misguided people, and partly the force of habit. Yeah, the Democrats they both follow the leaders, but the Republican leaders are like, oh, Democrats are the Antichrist. They're Democratic leaders, and their consultants are, oh, reach across the aisle. Like Eisenhower, they're just going to be nice people like him.
Mhm. Well, yeah, like I remember Pelosi talking about, well, why can't we get to the Republican Party that supported environmentalism and a woman's right to choose? At like, but that's insane. Like, who are these people? I mean, I'm in Portland, Oregon, and yes, there were once Republicans who supported environmentalism and while also wanting, tax cuts. And then there were Republicans who supported a woman's right to choose. But now there's like two of them and they still vote for
Yeah,
justices to overturn. So it's just they're living in sort of a fantasy. So it's kind of like Republicans are attacking Democrats based on and telling their potential voters a fantasy nightmarish version of Democrats, which is obviously
exactly.
slanderous and terrible. But Democrats seem to be existing in this world of longing for a sort of fantasy, idealized version of Republicans, maybe that they've seen on the West Wing that fundamentally don't exist, which obviously can be more dangerous, right? Because it's like that's
Mhm.
not going to help you.
As a psychologist, I'm aware that people often long for things that don't exist, often things that existed in their childhood or adolescence. And as you mentioned, Eisenhower did. and that's what they long for. But that's gone. So, we're in a quandary there that if they won't face reality, then we need to find Democratic leaders who do. And the technical Democratic leaders aren't facing reality, but there are a lot of Democratic leaders who are not uh, the technical leaders in Congress, some of the governors, Pritzker, Wes Moore, Jasmine Crockett, Elizabeth Warren, Senator Whitehouse, Adam Schiff. There are a lot of people who are not the technical leaders of the Democratic Party who are facing reality to a greater degree. And that's a good thing. And, I think somehow we need to get more people in the Democratic Party that can face reality so that we can combat fascism.
Some of those Democrats you mentioned, they talk that game, but then they still support the kind of fossilized leadership. They still sort of come in line. It's sort of a kind of version of the Republicans who try to present themselves as reasonable and talking against Trump, but still support him, still support his nominees. And it sort of seems a much smaller group of Democrats who are willing to say there's a sort of structural issue within the party, within how we communicate with our leaders. And that, I guess, can be tough. There's obviously not much support in just saying we need to sort of replace our leadership and kind of go on the offensive against Democrats. But I guess we would have to, right? Like, let me ask you, what in your kind of research and work, like obviously these consultants believe what they're saying. It's not like they're not doing the producers. It's not a scam. I'm not doing conspiracy theories. They have their own bias, but they're being listened to. Why are they still getting hired? Because it seems that they're often their results aren't delivering, or are their results delivering? Or are they delivering results?
Well, there seem to be results from them. The thing is, some of these consultants or their consultant group have worked for long periods of time for Democrats, and the Democrat that hired them has been an incumbent maybe for a long time. Well, the leaders have, and so you're an incumbent. This is your consultant. You get reelected every time. But incumbents almost always get reelected. So that doesn't mean your consultant is good, but they may assume so. Another thing I want to kind of get on a little bit different track here is that although I think we should try to improve the Democratic Party and get more people in it who are aware of propaganda, I think maybe most of combating propaganda would need to be done by liberals and Democrats, not as a part of the Democratic Party, but aside from that. Just like Rupert Murdoch is not an official of the Republican Party, and yet he's responsible for a lot of the propaganda that gets them elected all the time. And that's a powerful position. And also when people get in that position, they have of power themselves without the Democratic Party, they can then influence the Democratic Party from their own base of power. So, I think it would be really great if either wealthy Democrats would buy up or start some new media to spread the truth, and maybe start more social media truth forums to combat troll forums. I think that would be great. And it's very hard to get wealthy Democrats to do anything related to that, so that may be impossible. And if so, then maybe a lot of small donors can put together a foundation to promote and start new media and social media and deal with the propaganda issue. Because your whole propaganda push, if it's Democrat and then you've got Republicans in all branches of power, you're kind of immobilized when the Republicans are in power. But if you're totally separate from the Democratic Party, you're still doing all your stuff. You're not Biden's disinformation governance board that got disbanded in a few months. You're your own social media company, TV station, talk radio station, that you've got your own base of power.
That's such a great point. And I know I've seen people effectively, collectively spend the equivalent of a Marvel movie budget on failed Senate campaigns in Kentucky or South Carolina, for instance, and even $100 million for a new media would be useful and would benefit more results because it would continue. It's not just you put all this money and people, because these campaigns, and I have similar concerns about the Texas Senate race, which might essentially, I am skeptical as to whether Democrats could win, but it's again a case of where people raise a lot of money that ultimately goes to consultants and people in the world of running elections, but don't then lead to anything down the line as to combating what you're discussing. Also, do you have an idea of why? We all know that Fox News is in the pocket of the Republican Party. It's state media. We've seen, this has been part of lawsuits.
I wouldn't say that. I would say that the Republican Party is in the pocket of Fox News.
Yeah, Stephen Frum famously said that. He said that we thought
Wait, I'm sorry, go
Fox.
ahead.
We thought Fox worked for us. We actually work for Fox News. I would sort of correct that to say that they are sort of, working together essentially as a right wing, whatever part of the right wing propaganda outlet, or however you want to describe it. It just seems less contrived. It just seems as if Jesse Waters, or then later like a Carlson, were authentically themselves, as horrible as that is. And sometimes with a lot of Democratic influencers online, it can sometimes seem that, to me, it's more obvious that they are parroting Democratic talking points, and maybe it's how those talking points are conveyed or written, but it just doesn't seem authentic. It just seems like, really, you're really pushing by, you're this 25-year-old who thinks Biden's awesome, and you really, is this authentic? And it's hard to believe what they're saying. But is that just my own bias? I know it's not. From the results, certainly people aren't.
I think that's true. That Democratic candidates sound less authentic. I think sometimes, not always. And I think part of that is that Democratic candidates often have very inept consultants, and they don't know what to do to sound authentic, whether they are authentic or not. They don't know how to sound it because it's just amazing to me how inept the consultants seem to be. That and everything that the Republicans do is, I'm sure they've got a ton of research and on how to impact voters and how to sound authentic. And even that Tara Reade story about Biden having sexually assaulted her, that was constructed as a story to be believable. I remember the journalist Matt Iglesias, who's no stupid person, saying, "Oh yes, I find her story very believable." Well, of course you do. It was researched to the max to make sure that the sound of it was believable before the Republicans gave her the story to put out there. And so whether it's the appearance of authenticity or anything else that attracts voters, it seems like Republicans have a ton more research, and they have this gigantic infrastructure, just incredibly, all these think tanks, which are often just propaganda tanks that come up with talking points. And and all the right-wing talk radio and social media and TV and newspapers that take over local news outlets, all of this gigantic, powerful, valuable, financially valuable infrastructure. Republicans have built this up while Democrats just don't have much at all, comparatively speaking. And so they're not going to do as good a job because they don't have as good infrastructure, but they also stubbornly refuse to hire better consultants, which is a part of it, indeed.
Well, there's sort of a long-ranging, and I get the criticism, but I've seen even after Harris's loss, the criticism of mainstream media from CNN to New York Times. But if you looked at the polling data or the exit polling data, Harris won people who got their news through traditional means. So it's like you could still, be critical of how New York Times covered Trump versus Biden or Harris, but ultimately, if you only read the New York Times, Washington Post, or watch CNN, the majority of those people voted for Harris. The problem was again in social media, and then being even worsened by the fact that so much of what should have been a Democratic coalition was in social media. So it was outside of their perception of the world and everything. And yeah, Democrats have sort of ceded ground in those areas and the way they communicate. Like, as you're saying, this consultants, this is willful. Like, AOC doing Instagram lives or talking about issues from her home and like communicating with people, and they've done the studies. Like video connects with people far more than releasing a photo of a statement. But that's still how Jeffries communicates, and he's only a couple years older than I am, so he's not ancient. I like to think we're not ancient. So these are choices they're making as to how to communicate. How much of that do you think is just, and part of it maybe is just response to Trump, because Trump was someone who was he's always on Twitter and on social media. But I don't know, it seems like a lot of how he communicated was effective. It's just effective in a bad way. And we should just not try to like double down on not doing what he did, because to your point, he's sort of the Fox News viewer who became president. Like he was a boomer of a certain age, watched Fox News, went down those rabbit holes, rejected the establishment. And as you correctly pointed out, Fox News is sort of in charge more than the GOP. And that's why Trump prevailed. And I think we can focus more on sort of, in fact, him being someone radicalized by Fox even more, and someone being kind of that typical Fox News viewer more so than him having been on The Apprentice or him being even this billionaire. It's just that he is someone who came through that own propaganda line and now is doing it himself.
Yeah, and he can influence those people very well who are Fox News watchers, because they're all marinating in the same soup.
Do you think that Fox News is filling a need that those people wanted, or that Fox News came in and twisted those people to be a certain way? Or is that sort of a question that's hard to answer just from a psychiatric
No, it's easy to answer. There's a book about this called a book about Roger Ailes, and I'm trying to think of the name now, about how Roger Ailes shaped Fox. And the way that he did it was that he tried to convert people to vote Republican. That's documented. That's what he did. That he wasn't trying to please the voters or satisfy their needs, except as a tool to getting them to vote Republican. That's what he wanted them to do. It wasn't making money, and I think Murdoch would keep it up even if it never did. But at the beginning of Fox, it lost like $100 million a year, which was more back then than it is now, because it wasn't making money. But he didn't care. He didn't change what he was doing to please the viewers. He just kept trying to make the viewers Republican and got more investors. So it very definitely was an attempt to get Republican voters.
I think not enough focus has been on how it's targeted right-leaning women. Like a lot of the narratives seem geared towards right-leaning women in a certain way of like what to scare them about specifically. I don't know if you've noticed that, but it's done. And and I think that's often ignored from the left.
I mean, and that's something that's not a need. They don't need to be scared, but they're scared into voting Republican, and that's the method. There's a lot of fear mongering, hate mongering, grievance mongering, about the evil Democrats and what they're supposedly trying to do to your children. all these sorts of things. And they get people riled up, so riled up. I had a relative once who died of Fox News because he was sitting there in his chair, ignoring his doctor's advice about his blood pressure, that he shouldn't watch things or do things that get his blood pressure raised up high. And he was ranting and raving about those evil Democrats, and he keeled over and died of a heart attack. And I bet he's not the only one who did. They're scaring these people in ways that are not good for them, in ways that don't satisfy a need of theirs necessarily. I mean, certainly some people, maybe they're racist and they love to hear Fox say racist things. There's some needs probably satisfied by some people, but a lot of times not. A lot of the times it's just manipulation, and getting them to fear and hate and have grievances based on unreality.
And if you think about when Fox News came around, it would be sort of during early middle age of the boom generation. So if you're sort of a white boomer who was maybe young during civil rights, and both in women's rights and minority rights revolutions, and then you're sort of reaching middle age in the mid to late 90s, and it sort of came in right at that point. And so a lot of people, I mean, they might have already been Republican, but certainly there's a difference between kind of, you know, believing certain Republican rhetoric and then kind of really kind of being primed to believe anything, or feeling like there's a new enemy, especially because this is shortly after the end of the Cold War. So who is the enemy? Who needs to be the enemy? And we're saying half the nation is the enemy. It's sort of like building up for what I hope does not become another civil war, but it is kind of a dangerous thing. And, you know, it's interesting. I feel like I was guilty of this, just viewing Fox News as something silly, like just something that was part of the material for Jon Stewart. So I would see Fox News clips only through The Daily Show with Jon Stewart making fun of something crazy. Oh, they believe this, or oh, they're going on about this, like this, they made a character black and who was traditionally white, and they're all upset about it. That's really silly, but not thinking about what's happening to the people who are in that soup, as you said, like being, you know, and I think, I don't know if that's been truly communicated. I mean, there've been some stories about that or so forth, but like the sort of damage, or the people who, you know, are being primed to just feel resentment and anger. And there's only one way. You can't come to them and talk about lowering their tax rates if that's not what people are telling them the true threat to them is.
Yeah, it's something that's hard to get a handle on for people who don't trust Fox News or Sinclair, which covers 40% of households in the U.S., who don't trust these right-wing outlets and maybe hear about them on a comedy show. It can be hard to understand how it is to be in the soup of that all the time, you know, every week, or maybe even every weekday night or whatever you watch some Fox show. You know, humans are creatures of habits, and a lot of this has to do with trust and distrust, and they're trying to get people to trust the right-wing media and social media, and then once they get their trust, they get them to distrust Democrats and dislike Democrats. And so a lot of this is a trust issue, and just the issue of the fact that the human brain works more like a tape recorder than any of us would like to believe. You know, if people hear something over and over and over again, especially from a trusted source, they're gone. You know, that's worn a groove into their brain, that lie, and that's truth to them. And so the impact of these repeated lies on people is just amazing. And often it's not anything they need. They really didn't need to think that these guys didn't need to think that asking them to wear a mask during the COVID epidemic was an assault on their manhood. They didn't need to believe that. You know, they didn't need to die of COVID or keep their children unvaccinated and have them die of measles. They didn't need that, but it made a good culture war issue for Republicans. And so they took off on it. And as ridiculous as these things were, they repeated them so many times that those statements wore a groove into people's brains. And that was more true than the sun coming up every morning to them.
And before we go, I have one question, because I know Oliver Willis, great writer, and myself, a less distinguished writer, but we've both been kind of shouting to the rooftops, often against a brick wall amongst other liberals, that going on Fox News, if you're a Democrat, is a losing proposition. And the argument has been like, you need to reach people who only watch Fox News, but it seems that, to your point, Roger, he has this network to make people vote Republican. If you are being booked on the show, you're not beating the house. It's like Vegas. It's like, I'm going to come in and break the bank. It's like, no, you're here to further the propaganda, almost from a kind of a wrestling standpoint, right? To show it wouldn't be enough to have these Fox News hosts just ranting right-wing rhetoric. It does benefit them to appear to prevail in arguments against a controlled opposition. But I think the Democrats believe that they go on there and aren't part of the controlled opposition.
Yeah, I think that's just another way of underestimating the effects of being in the soup. I mean, a Democrat goes on Fox, they say a few true things, it's immediately drowned in an avalanche of lies from Fox News, on and on and on. And they may use the clips from the show to argue later on and tell more lies. And so I think a lot of Democrats that go on there mean well, but the fact is that the mission of Fox News is to get people to vote GOP, and they're not going to let any Democrat coming on there interfere with that mission. They're going to find a way to fulfill that mission anyway, and very often to use your interview on Fox News to further that mission too. Also, a way of making Fox News credible, of pretending that it's not a propaganda outlet, pretending it's a news station, which it clearly is not. And people really need to be aware of that. And a big problem in our society is this is so normalized, this idea of Fox being a real news media outlet, of Twitter being such a real good social media network, so good and informative, that all these journalists and politicians and people are on Twitter, but not on Blue Sky or somewhere else where the truth is more commonly told. It's just, there's so much of right-wing talking points and right-wing media that's normalized as if it's a normal thing, a normal news media, a normal social network. Sports announcers say right-wing talking points and just pull people in. Pastors of right-wing churches say right-wing talking points and pull that in. Fox is on it in some areas at every police station, fire station. It's on in a lot of cruise ships. It's on at military bases. It's just like it's pulled into the culture as if it's a normal thing. And our challenge is to realize ourselves and get other people to realize that, no, this is not normal or true or news. This is lies.
And there really is no liberal equivalent to that, like especially amongst in working class or kind of seemingly apolitical areas. So that's definitely dangerous. Thank you so much for talking to me, Julie. Where can people find you and your work and your writing?
Well, I'm on Medium. You can search for my name on medium.com for my articles, Julie Hotard, and then Hotard. And also I'm on a lot on Blue Sky, and I'm at UPINE, at Upine is who I am, and on Blue Sky.
Well, thank you again, Julie, for chatting with us and trying to cut through disinformation. Your work's greatly appreciated. Everyone, check Julie out and like, share, subscribe this, and we'll talk to you later. Take care.